All right, welcome to the Lex Buds and Pick and Roll podcast. We are happy to be joined by former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. Corey, we are really excited to have you in here today, man. Thanks for stopping by.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So you're from the North. You're a Northeasterner, right? We're based in Kentucky. The Northeast is kind of like the moon to me. I grew up in the mountains of East Kentucky. What's it like growing up in the Northeast?
Well, I grew up in a place called Lowell, Massachusetts, which is a blue-collar town on the Merrimack River, which, the height of its success was the turn of the century. And I don't mean the last century, the century before that. It was a mill town, and it was a place that produced textiles and produced good work ethic and hard workers. And, I know a little bit about Kentucky because I spent some time in a place called Rough River. You ever hear of Rough River, Kentucky?
It sounds rough. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's on the western part. I dated this girl from Massachusetts whose family had a home out there. And so we used to make the drive from just north of Boston out to Rough River, Kentucky every year. It was about 23 hours straight, but it was a beautiful area to be.
The things you do for love, Corey.
True.
So you're from the Massachusetts area. Our current basketball coach, Calipari, coached up there for a little bit at UMass. I don't know if you followed sports. I think you were in school maybe at the time that he was coaching. Is that around the same time frame?
Yeah, so John was coaching a guy by the name of Marcus Camby, if you remember. He made it to the Final Four, lost to a guy by the name of Allen Iverson, in case you forget that guy, the guy who went to Georgetown on a full academic scholarship, of course. Allen was there on a full academic scholarship.
Sure.
But, maybe at his position, Allen Iverson might have been the greatest player at his position at that period of time. They went to the Final Four. Camby played Iverson. Iverson won in Georgetown. Calipari obviously had a phenomenal career. He was the head coach at UMass when he was 28 years old. Unbelievably successful guy. And, he's had just an enormous career for, the last 30 years now in college basketball.
Yeah, and Corey, that actually ties in with one of our listener questions that we had. Everything in Kentucky centers around college basketball. So, of course, we have to ask you a question about John Calipari. Tom from Lexington wants to know, if John Calipari decides to retire in a few years and seek political office, what advice would you offer, and would you urge him to let Cal be Cal?
I'd say don't do it. You're a really rich dude, right? Calipari's made a lot of money, dude. Just take your dough. Go play at the Rep Arena every now and then, right? Ask some of the rich guys over there just to give you a check, the boosters as we call them, and don't run for office. Look, the truth is politics is a blood sport, and if you think the world of college basketball is competitive, think of what the media would do. Look, you've got two amazing coaches, right? Pitino and Calipari, who have gone toe-to-toe in Kentucky for a long time in the world of college basketball. Some get better press than others. I think there's leaks going back and forth. These guys are probably leaking on each other is my guess, right? And if he's going to run for office, do this. Pick a nice, safe, beautiful red state like Alabama. Okay, it's working out pretty well for Tuberville. The guy was a coach at Auburn. He's going to be the next United States Senator. So if you're going to do this, right, do me a favor, John. Kentucky's beautiful. It's a beautiful red state. You can't beat Rand. You'll never beat Mitch. Being the governor probably isn't for you. So go find a beautiful red state down in like Mississippi where Brett Favre lives and go run for office down there.
There you go. Sounds like a good plan.
We'll share that with Coach Cal next time we talk to him.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate that. Tell him I'm a big fan of his. And, for a guy who has had, and I mean this, the longevity that he's had in the sport, right? It's so difficult. The slings and the arrows, the putting together the new teams, the recruiting, what it takes to be successful, the boosters, the raising of the money, the constant pressure to perform in the big arena. When you're a D1 player, right, it is not an easy thing to do, and he's always found a way to win.
Absolutely, no doubt about that.
Yeah, so you've been in politics for a while, Corey, and I could be wrong on this. Of course, the first thing we do when we have a guest on is we go to their Wikipedia page, and we know that those are 100% accurate, right?
Shit, 100% full of shit.
Absolutely. 100% accurate. Now, I heard that you tried to get into politics, I guess, when you were even an undergrad in school. Is that correct?
Yeah, I made such a dumb mistake. I thought being an elected official would be a good job, and so I think I was a junior in high school. A state representative seat in Massachusetts opened. The guy had been in the same slot for, probably 30 years. He was retiring. It became an open seat. I wanted to run as a Republican. The guy who ran as a Democrat was actually my cousin's best friend. He literally lives 6 houses up the road from me. I grew up with the guy. He's, by the way, that was in 1994. That guy's still the same state rep today. I'm not exaggerating. He has the same
Wow.
seat, doing the same job. So, it's been a good career for him. And he's a friend of mine, but I think of the two of us, I turned out a little more successful.
Sure, absolutely. And that's why you're here. That's why you're here and he's not.
And look, he's a good guy. And I know Tom Golden. He's a Democrat from Massachusetts. He's a good Democrat. He's a good guy. But I think, really when I look at it and said, can you make a difference? Because I think my life is about trying to make a difference, right? Doing things where people tell you can't do them, whether it was in college or graduate school or whatever it was, right? When I was in high school, when I went to a Catholic high school, my nuns told me I'd never be anything. I'd never be successful. And all those things. I grew up being poor, so you didn't know what poor was because everyone was as poor as you were. And so hard work just pays off. And I think, my best ability to impact things in the public policy arena has been by being a staff guy, by being the guy who helps a person I believe in get elected. And, for 6 years, more than 6 years, almost 7 years, I've spent my time helping Donald Trump in one capacity or another. Whether he was just Donald Trump, the businessman, Donald Trump, the candidate, the president-elect, or, I spoke to the president last night on the phone for an extended period of time. And so, I continue to help him any way I can because I think I want to help my country that way.
That's really interesting that you kind of led into a question I wanted to ask. You talked about Trump as the businessman, Trump as the president. Is the Donald Trump that we see on television, the Donald Trump we see giving his speeches across the country in packed arenas, is that the true Donald Trump? Is he a different person behind closed doors?
It's a hard question to answer. I'll tell you why. Because he's both ways. Nobody has had their skull ripped off more than I have from Donald Trump over the last 6 years. Okay, this guy is. I've offered to get off the airplane at 30,000 feet without it stopping and no parachute. I told services, hey fellas, you better bar the door because this is my stop. They said, sir, we're 30,000 feet up over Wisconsin. I said, it looks good to me. Okay. But the truth is the guy deserves perfection because when he comes to the arena, whether it's the business arena, the television arena, the book arena, or whatever, now in politics, this guy gives 150% every single day. Now, what the public doesn't see that I've had the privilege to see over the last almost 7 years is how magnanimous Donald Trump is, how caring Donald Trump is. When I spent my time on the road traveling with him, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, he would say to me, Corey, how's your family doing? What can I do to help? Do they understand how hard you're working? We miss our families together. And I remember we had a guy who worked for us whose name is George Jujikos, and he had 2 young girls who had a dance recital that day. One was about 5 and one was about 7. This goes back about 5 years ago. And George couldn't make it because he was doing our advance work for the campaign and we needed him on the road. And then Mr. Trump picked up the phone and recorded a message to these 2 young girls and said, I'm sorry your daddy can't be with you today, but we're trying to change America for you so you have a better way of life. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal today, but 5 years ago, these girls now have something that's so special that the President of the United States on record has talked about how important their dad was. And that's something they'll have forever. And that's really who Donald Trump is. He's very gracious. He's very magnanimous. And by the way, he's so funny. Sometimes we see it when he debates, when he's got the one-liners about crooked Hillary, you'd be in jail, right? Things like that. He's just so funny sometimes. And that's why people love to be around him. He has one of those personalities that so few people have.
You answered a couple of questions there because one of the others I wanted to get to was on a scale of 1 to 10, how scary is Donald Trump if you're on his bad side? And you answered it by saying jump out of a plane bad. So I'm going to say that's an 11.
Hey, look, you better get tough, okay? I tell my kids, you better get tough. Look, let me tell you this story. I testified in front of Congress, as you guys know, on I think 6 or 7 different occasions. But the last time was last September when I had to sit in front of Congressman Jerry Nadler's committee. And I went through this public grilling on television for about 7 hours. I was exhausted mentally and physically. It's just emotionally draining sitting there and having these lunatics barrage you with questions. And I finished speaking, and I had noticed that the president had called me a number of times while I was testifying. I obviously couldn't take the call as much as I wanted to put him on speakerphone because I think that would have been a kick-ass story if I put him on speaker during the testimony. But I didn't do that. And so I called him right after, and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" The president was in California at the time. I said, "Sir, I'm exhausted, to tell you the truth. It was such a grueling day." And he says, "Hey, Lewandowski, what are you going to go stand in the corner and suck your thumb like a little baby? Go fight." And I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. President." So, because that's who he is, okay? Because this is a guy who has been crushed by the media, the fake Russian hoax. Now they're telling this guy that he's stealing post office boxes, right? PO boxes. He's out stealing mailboxes they're accusing him of. You know what this guy does? Wakes up every day and fights some more. And it is a special, special person who can do that.
You talked about just now when you testified before Congress. I'm really just kind of personally interested in before, like the night before and the morning of when you're going in. How do you mentally prepare yourself, knowing you're about to be grilled for hours and that everybody's just trying to get you to slip up, everybody's trying to get the soundbite from you? What do you mentally do to prepare? I kind of think, I don't know if you ever watched The Office, but the character Dwight Schrute, before he goes in to ask his boss for a pay raise, he's jamming out to Motley Crue in the hallway before. So I'm kind of curious, what did you do to kind of prepare before you testified before Congress?
Guys, number one, I had an amazing team who helped me. And my attorney, Peter Chavkin, was standing with me and been with me when I had to testify in the closed door rooms for the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Mueller investigation. He was with me every step of the way, and I have enormous gratitude for that. But I also put together what I call a team of killers, okay? Dave Bossie, who was the chief investigator in Congress, who's my great friend, who we wrote a couple books together, sat there and put together a team of Ed Rogers from BGR and Dan Murphy and Jason Osborne and guys who have been there and worked on these committees and said, here are the questions they're going to ask you. And we spent collectively probably a couple 100 hours getting ready for that. And we made the strategic decision. Part of our strategy was, hey, for the same respect you gave Bob Mueller, I'm going to demand the same respect, which means I want a copy of the report. I want you to reference it. And look, I'm a pretty high energy, pretty intense kind of guy. And so, like, for me, the best thing I can do to get some energy is I'll go and ride the bike for 25 miles, or I'll go bang in 10 miles on a run, or I'll go do something to get some energy out, because I got so much energy. Sitting at that table, to me, is like a prison, right? You can't get away. And I remember these guys, they're such liars. It was the end of the congressional hearing, and I'd been there for 6 or 7 hours, and they said, the witness has requested a bathroom break. I said, yeah, no, I didn't. No. The witness says he has to go pee. I said, hey, Jerry, listen to me. If your Depends are full, it's perfectly fine, but don't blame it on me, brother. Like, I'm happy to let's just wrap this baby up.
Oh, that is a great story. Great story.
That is. And now, when you're doing those, when you're testifying for 6-7 hours, you become fodder for your late night TV host, your the daily shows and stuff like that, and you get ripped. Right, they absolutely rip you in two. Do you just brush it off and go on, or is it just expected at this point and you're used to it?
I love it. You know why? Because when they're talking about me, they're not talking about what the president's doing, and all they want to do is attack him. So I get no problem. Look, I got broad shoulders. I've taken a lot of arrows for this president, my family. About maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, some guy calls me up. I'd never heard of the guy. He says, I just went through the internet and I saw all the bad stories about you. And if you pay me a lot of money, I'll clean them all up. I said, please don't touch them. Okay, don't get rid of any of those stories. I love them all. And that's what the media doesn't understand, right? They think I was going to walk into Congress and fold like a cheap suit. The highest honor I could get was they equated me to Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North when he went and decimated those guys during the Iran-Contra hearing. And look, I truly believe, and I've talked to the president's team, and I've talked to the president's attorneys about this, the reason the House Judiciary Committee did not prosecute the president, which has historically been the case for the articles of impeachment, was because of my testimony. And so to me, that's a giant badge of honor.
Nice. Now, I guess, so you were Trump's former campaign manager for a long time, actually. I mean, you went there from the beginning to almost up to the convention point. And I think it's safe to say, whether you like Trump or not, he is portrayed as probably one of the most chaotic candidates, but also because he's one of the more unique candidates. Right? He just kind of says what he thinks, and people didn't know how to handle that. Can you walk us through what a day in the life of Corey Lewandowski was like just on a normal day during the campaign season? I know there's no normal day, but when you wake up in the morning, or do you wake up?
Well,
You
let
know,
me tell you
what
how
time
it
do you
goes.
wake up? What time do you go to bed?
I'll just give you a day that we would spend in New York where the campaign office was. And there weren't many because a big portion of our campaign strategy was to be on the road, right? To go out and campaign and see the American people, do these massive rallies with the American people came to know. But my day would traditionally be get up at 4 a.m. I would go and get a workout at a gym in New York at the 5 a.m. workout session. I'd end at 5:30. I'd be back in my apartment, shower, and I would be in my office in Trump Tower by 6 a.m. so I could watch the morning shows. That would be, Morning Joe, Fox and Friends, CNN, MSNBC, I do them all. By 7 a.m., I'd be on the phone with the candidate, and we'd either be talking about what the morning shows are talking about, or we'd be talking about what our day looked like for the day. By 8 a.m., we'd have a staff meeting almost every single day, and that would include all of the staff from around the country. Obviously, it grew over time. Some of those people would be in the New York office, others would be on the phone. By 9 a.m., we're either working on policy papers or we're dealing with whatever the crisis of the day is. And then historically, we're on the road. Then we'd get on the road sometime around 10 or 11 or 12. We'd fly to some city, some state, do a couple rallies, and then we'd get back to New York sometime around 11 p.m. is usually when we were back in New York. We'd go wheels down at 11. I'd be back in my apartment by 12, and we do this all over again. And on the days, that was a very typical day, very typical 20-hour day is what was anticipated. Look, we didn't have any people, so it wasn't like I could farm this out. It was Dan Scavino and Hope Hicks and Georgie Gikos and Keith Schiller and, a small cadre of people. So you had to do everything. And it was actually, as much as it was chaotic, it was actually very calming because you knew the circle of trust was very small and you knew there were no leaks. We never had a leak in that campaign. From January of 15, when I started it, until Paul Manafort entered the campaign in April of 16, there was never one leak because there was only 5 people who knew what the hell was going on in the whole place. And we trusted each other implicitly, and we were all there for one reason, which was to help Donald Trump get elected. And look, even on those days where you get to your apartment at midnight and you're sleeping till 4, then candidate Trump would call you at 2 a.m. and say, hey, what are you doing? You'd say, well, I'm not sleeping, sir, because I just left you an hour ago, so I'm definitely not sleeping. And many, many, many days he'd say, well, if you feel like coming in today, Corey, I've been up all night waiting for you to come in to show up at the office. And he'd be waiting in the campaign office for you at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, waiting for you to arrive.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
okay.
I think you have sealed my decision to never go into to be a campaign manager. 20-hour days, that sounds like too much.
Hey, I was literally, this is not an exaggeration, guys, at the end of my tenure, and I had massive sleep deprivation. I'm not a heavy guy. I probably lost 15 or 20 pounds, which is an enormous percentage of my weight at the time. Unhealthy, drinking anywhere between 10 and 15 big cans of Monster a day to try and keep up. Completely, and then you're so tired you can't get to the gym, so you just end up in the cycle, and you're eating bad food because you're traveling and you're still losing weight, and you look like you just came. Like you hadn't been fed in a month. And this guy just kept on going. He kept on going like it was like a run rate regular day. I'm like, we've just done 19 20-hour days in a row, sir. And he was just like, hey, we're going to do 20 tomorrow.
That's crazy. So obviously it was exhausting. But looking back at it, is there one particular moment that stands out to you that just kind of something you always remember, or maybe just something really funny that happened, or maybe something just went completely wrong? What's a memory you have that you will always think back fondly of during the campaign?
Look, I like to think that the best night for me was the first time we won a primary. And it just so happened to be in my home state of New Hampshire, right? We finished second in Iowa. We had 8 days in between the Iowa caucus and the Hampshire primaries. We flew across the country. He was as, angry as a wet hen. And, he was not listening to anybody. And after 2 days, our poll numbers had fallen dramatically. And I had to sit him down and say, sir, if you don't want to listen, you'll also be another rich guy who ran for president and you lost. And he turned immediately. We went on, we won the New Hampshire primary by 19 points over 17 opponents, which was just an absolute drumming. I mean, it was just unbelievable to be able to do that with a field of that big, of that caliber. And I remember that night, on election night, on the stage, he brought me up, and unlike anybody else, any other politician, and he wasn't a politician, he just thanked me and my team, and my family was there. Nobody does that, right? Nobody in politics. Look, Marco Rubio finished third in Iowa. Ted Cruz won Iowa. Ted Cruz didn't say to his team, hey, come on up, fellas, let's all celebrate this together. And it set off a tradition for 38 primaries and caucuses that Donald Trump won every time the whole team was up there, right? You look when he's down in Florida saying, thank you for helping me win Florida. It's me, and it's Karen Giorno, and it's the team, and it's his family. And that's what it became, was the family. The campaign was an extension of his family because we spent so much time with them. So fondly, because I love my state of New Hampshire, winning that first primary and setting the path forward for 37 more primaries and caucuses, and going on to see him, some people will argue what we achieved in the primary was more difficult. Beating that field of candidates with an unknown guy who'd never run before on a shoestring budget, okay, was more difficult than actually beating Hillary Clinton when we had the entire party apparatus behind us and a terrible candidate on the other side.
Well, let me ask this, because this is, I'm not going to say it's a conspiracy theory, but it's something I've thought for a while. My opinion is that Donald Trump's been a Democrat most of his life. I think that'd be safe to say, right? And he switched over to the Republican Party not too long, before the elections. I've always felt that he is probably the only independent candidate that I'm ever going to vote for in my life that happened to join the Republican ticket. Has he ever talked to you about that? My question is, does he consider himself an independent or a true Republican?
No, he considers himself a Republican, but not a Republican in the traditional sense for the last 30 years. Not in the sense of George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, John McCain, right? It's just not in that Republic. Look, when Donald Trump came down that escalator, he talked about illegal immigration, which was the third rail for Republican Party politics. Nobody wants to talk about that. The after-action report after Mitt Romney's terrible campaign was, we have to be more inclusive. We can't talk immigration. We can't talk renegotiation of trade. We're going to kiss China's ass on everything we do. We're going to give them a big bear hug and tell them you're the greatest. Guys like Henry Kissinger were telling us, hey, go and cozy up to China. It's the way to go. And Donald Trump said, hey, fellas, they're eating our lunch every day, okay? If we want to be the greatest country this planet has ever known, we're going to fight back. Listen, I just finished this new book. It's called Trump America First, which is what he believes in. And I went back and I did the research. And here's what it says. In 2008, Donald Trump went to Las Vegas to give a speech to the Clark County Republican Party. And here's what he said. He said, look, fellas, we need to get smart. We need to get tough with China. And if I ever got elected, or if I ever ran, I would put a 25% tariff on these guys faster than you could blink. And then he went on to use some expletives that I won't even use here because it's amazing the way he talks, because that's how he talks, okay? Because he's a New Yorker. And look what he did. That was in 2008. He gets elected in 2016. He goes out and does exactly what he's been talking about for decades, which is holding China accountable. Every other Republican in the country for the last 30 years has said, let's cozy up to China. We can be kumbaya buddies together, right? But we brought in Peter Navarro, who the economist, who's just an absolute monster when it comes to China, right? Now, we have differences of opinion, but we also got Bob Lighthizer. But Donald Trump transformed the Republican Party. He bent it to his will like Superman bends steel. That's what this guy does. Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, I know they're friends of some of the people watching. They were the go along to get along types. And Donald Trump said for 30 years, our foreign policy doesn't work anymore, fellas. We're going to be the toughest, strongest, greatest country the world has ever seen. If you don't like it, tough shit. Our allies are going to pay their fair share, and our enemies are going to fear us. And guess what? For 4 years later, our allies are paying their fair share, and our enemies are scared to death of us, as they should be.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming election as well with you, Corey, just to get your thoughts on it. There are so many unknowns right now, just with the world the way it is with the coronavirus. So I want to ask you first, with everything happening with the lockdowns, with people not being out to campaign, it's really changed the way people campaign. Do you think that benefits Trump more or Biden more, just the current situation we're in with COVID-19? Who do you think will benefit more from the situation that we're in?
Well, I really think that the Democrats and David Axelrod, who's the famed political strategist who helped Barack Obama get elected, hit it right on the head. Joe Biden's only chance is to stay out of the limelight. His only chance is to stay hidden and not answer tough policy questions. And when you're criticized by a guy like David Axelrod, who served 8 years in the Obama administration, saying Joe has to come out and answer questions. You can't send Jill out. You can't send Kamala Harris out. You're the person running. This COVID-19 crisis has clearly helped Joe Biden. It's given the media the opportunity to continue to chastise this president for a swift and decisive action, whether that was banning flights coming in from mainland China unless you're an American citizen or a permanent green card holder, or he has said, we're going to close the economy to bend the curve, right? Every day we see another story about his failures to act on COVID-19. Every day, just last week, this is the truth. Joe Biden put out 7 recommendations of what he would do if he was the president as it relates to COVID-19. Donald Trump had already executed all 7 of those. And so this pandemic has prevented us from one of our greatest assets, which is the president's ability to get in front of people, bypass the legacy mainstream media, and talk directly to the people in those massive settings. Those people in 16 waited, 8 hours, 16 hours, 2 days to get inside to see a man give a speech because they were enthralled by what he was going to say. I used to equate it to going to a sporting event. You go to a KU game, right? Because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You go see Louisville play, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen at the end and you want to be there to witness it, especially if it's something special. And that's what these people did. And the media told us, none of these people are going to vote, right? None of these people, these are all just, wait in line, but they're not going to take the 30 seconds it takes to walk into the ballot box and press the button, even though they just spent 2 days waiting in line to see a man speak on a stage. He doesn't play a guitar. He doesn't sing. He doesn't even tell too many jokes, right? He just gets up there and talks, and you could watch this from home, but you want to be there. So I think the COVID-19 pandemic has hurt the way we campaign. We've transitioned to, by and large, from March to just about the beginning of August, in online campaign presence. So Zoom and Skype and things of that nature, but there's no substitute for in-person contact with people. We knocked on 1 million doors last week. Joe Biden knocked on 0. The media doesn't report that. And the fact that the hardest hitting interview that Joe Biden has done in the last week was with Cardi B. That's not an exaggeration. She literally read the questions and Joe Biden had the answers in front of him to the questions and read them back to her. And if the American people think that that person is ready to be the leader of the free world, to be the CEO of our country, then we are sorely mistaken about what Joe Biden is capable of.
Do you think they end up debating?
Well, I sure hope so. I prepped President Trump for, I think, 12 presidential debates in the primaries. I was prepping him for the 3 general election debates against crooked Hillary Clinton. He's a phenomenal debater. He's very quick, very witty on his feet. And I think what Joe candidly is going to do, the first debate is September 29th. It's in Ohio. It's been moved from Indiana. And I think what he's going to do is he's not going to show up. He's going to use some excuse. And the problem with that becomes, because of the way the Presidential Debate Commission has structured these, the first debate is September 29th. The second debate is, I think, October 5th, but that's the vice presidential debate. So that will be Mike Pence and Kamala Harris in Salt Lake. That debate is going to go forward. We know that for sure. The last 2 debates, which would take place the 3rd and 4th week, respectively, of October, are going to be the 2 presidential debates, by which time, if Joe Biden did not make the first debate, tens of millions of people will have already cast their ballots because the first ballots go out right after Labor Day. And so I think it's a mistake from the Presidential Debate Commission. We asked them to move the debates up to align with when the ballots are going out, and specifically either to add another debate and or simply take what would be the last debate and move it forward in the calendar so it would be directly following the Labor Day holiday. And they said, no, we can't change, which is just total bullshit. They could change, but they don't want to see Donald Trump win. And they know that Joe Biden is not going to be able to hold a candle to this guy.
Yeah. So one other kind of election question that I wanted to ask you. What are your thoughts on mail-in ballots? I think that's going to be the big topic for the next couple months, is how do we handle it? What do we do if votes are not accounted for? What is your sense? What would you like to see happen as far as the mail-in voting?
Well, we have to delineate between what we're talking about. States like Florida have what we call a permanent absentee voter file, which means if you're a resident of Florida and you have applied for an absentee ballot, whether it was a week ago or 5 years ago, there is a strict process in place, and you can follow that application from cradle to grave. And what I mean by that is from the time it leaves the clerk's office to the time it gets to your home, to the time you fill it out and you send it back, there's a barcode on that ballot that you can follow all the way through so you know exactly where it is. And further, in the state of Florida, when you apply for an absentee ballot, they do something called signature verification. So in order for you to vote, you have to sign the bottom that says you've done so under the penalty of perjury. That gets back to the clerk's office and they validate that signature as the person who actually did it. We're perfectly fine with that process. Perfectly fine with the system that's been tried and true and worked perfectly over the last 25 years in the state of Florida. What our concern is states that are simply mailing ballots to every person who's ever registered or lived at a physical address in a community. And we have already seen the stories of individuals or their pets who are receiving ballots, who haven't lived there in years, who have been deceased for years. Look, I was with Eric Trump last Monday. We were doing a bus tour through Florida. He told us of a woman in Pennsylvania who he knew, who's been married twice. At her home, she received a ballot in her maiden name, a ballot in her divorce name, a ballot in her married name, and 3 additional ballots that had spelling mistakes in her name, for a total of 6 ballots, all designated for one person. Look, we're the greatest country in the history of the planet. We should be able to run an election. We should be able to count ballots properly. We should have integrity in the process. And it wasn't long ago where the Democrats were against mail-in ballots. And, you know, both sides have disparaged Anthony Fauci on numerous occasions. Particularly the Democrats call him the Messiah every time he criticizes the president. But Anthony Fauci last week, the CDC expert, said there is no problem as it relates to COVID-19 and voting in person. There is no concern about that. We can do this safely and legally. You didn't see that covered anywhere. So our concern is what is known commonly as ballot harvesting. No accountability, meaning you send in multiple ballots and you still have the ability to go to the polling precinct on election day and vote there because they didn't verify that you signed this. And with no ID in place, I think it is ripe for potential problems. So that's our concern. We're going to use every legal remedy available to us to ensure that that does not transpire because, look, just in New York last week, it took 7 weeks and the president to call out the state of New York to give us the results in Carolyn Maloney's congressional district. That vote took place 7 weeks ago, and they couldn't tell us if she had won or lost the election. Do you truly believe the American people will wait 7 weeks to find out if we can count the ballots properly? I don't think so. I think it will be chaotic. It will be chaos, and it's unnecessary is the most important thing.
We're a very patient society, Corey. You know that. We can wait.
Me too. Yes.
That's baloney. I'm just kidding. No, you're right.
So
No.
do you think we will do you think we will know on election night who wins with you said it could be chaos. Do you think we'll know who wins?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Look, I think this race is going to be exceptionally close. The battleground states of Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, you know what they are, guys. Iowa, North Carolina. These races are going to be so razor thin in some places. Look, I think we're going to win big in Ohio. Don't tell anybody, but I think everyone agrees with that, okay? I think we're going to win big in Iowa. That's true. I think we're going to win big in North Carolina. But states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, we won by 10,704 votes 4 years ago, okay? That's a sliver. Florida, we won by 133,000 votes, and they called it a blowout. There were 8 million votes cast. And so, we've seen a huge influx of people who've moved into the state of Florida. So I don't know, just because of the magnitude of the number of people who I think are going to turn out, and the inability for government to do anything efficiently, if we're going to know on election night who the actual winner is. Don't forget, 4 years ago, it was about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning before we actually found out. I think if you add 8 or 10 hours to that, we'd find out the day after as votes are still coming in, which, your viewers will know, particularly in some congressional races, is actually a fairly common occurrence.
Now, let me play worst case scenario here. And you may not even want to talk about this, but we'll talk about it. Worst case scenario, let's say election night comes and 3 o'clock in the morning, we find out that Donald Trump did not get reelected. Let's just say that. Do you think that he would want to run again in 4 years? Do you think he may get up and give a concession speech and say, you know what, I'll see you in 4 years?
Look, I hope so. There's precedent to it. And by the way, if Donald Trump would have run in 4 years, he'd still be younger than Joe Biden is today. So, just think about that. I think this guy understands that in order to change Washington, you can't do it being a career politician. And look, that's not disparaging to any one person, but when you become part of the system, it just consumes you. When you've always done it that way. And I think that what we've seen from Donald Trump in 4 years is he's looked at things differently, done things differently, and the American people say, wow, you know what? Having an outsider is actually very beneficial. Everybody usually likes their congressman. They know him. They think he or she's a great person. Most people actually like their senators. And they're fine people individually. You put them in a room collectively, and they can't tie their shoes together, right? Because they can't agree on who's going to start with the first lace. So, sometimes it just takes the boss. Sometimes it just takes the boss, and Donald Trump is the boss, and it's important to have a strong person running our country, a strong CEO type.
Now, Corey, I have to ask you about this too. You've been involved with several news outlets, cable news outlets. Which ones have you been involved? I'm losing track right now. I know it's CNN, Fox News, probably all
Fox, OAN. Look, I've been on every network, on every channel in America, of course, right?
Here's something. Here's what I got to ask, because I'm a big believer that there's a lot of bias in the news, just by watching it. And I don't really watch a lot of it anymore unless something really major is happening. Were you ever privy to any conversations within any of those news organizations where you were like, oh my goodness, this is so one-sided, one way or another, that people should know about this, because what they see on TV is going to be a lopsided version of what's happening? Do you get where I'm coming from there? I mean, did you ever see that going on?
Well, let me say this,
on either side.
Let me say this, because I know, when I say I know, both professionally and personally, a lot of the people you see on television, the hosts, whether it's the Sean Hannitys of the world, the Tucker Carlsons, the Chris Cuomos, the Don Lemons, whoever it may be. Okay, I know them all. I've met them all, and I've talked to them all. A lot of, and I know this is going to be a little disparaging, a lot of what they do is just a shtick, right? They do it because they need to do it, because it's what the network requires. And let me give you an example. Alison Camerata used to be a Fox News host for a long time, right? She went over to CNN. I don't think her beliefs changed. Maybe they did. Maybe she never believed what she said at CNN. Maybe she always believed what she said at CNN. But now she espouses something very differently than what she did at Fox. The converse of that, the great Lou Dobbs, right? Lou Dobbs was at CNN for years, right? And now he's at Fox Business. And so I think sometimes the networks want people to portray a certain way about them. And these people are in those jobs. You get them out and you can have a beer with them somewhere. You go to a restaurant, absolutely different people. But to answer your question specifically, I'll tell you this. Election night 2016, I was on the set at CNN because I was obligated to. And I was sitting there with a whole panel of people. On my side was Jeffrey Lord, the great Jeffrey Lord. I think Haley McEnany might have been with me, who's now the White House press secretary, myself. And then there were 4 killers on the other side. And I knew, because I went to a public school, that I could count to 270, which is the number of electoral votes required to become president of the United States. And I kept looking at the numbers and said, boy, it sounds like 271, 274. Donald Trump's won. Let's call the election. And they said, no, we can't call the election. We're not ready to call it. And I said, look, the election's over. Donald Trump has won. Call the election. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep, because there's 6 votes outstanding, and in Miami-Dade County, and that could change the state of Florida and 29 electoral votes. I said, fella, I was so mad that what happened, I told the story and I wrote about it in Let Trump Be Trump, my book. It was so disingenuous that they didn't want to share with the American people what they actually knew at CNN on that particular night. They could have called the race hours ahead of time. They didn't want to do that. They walked onto the set and they said, once everybody in the set knew it, and everybody else, Nia, they all the longest faces. They would just crush. I can't believe Donald Trump won. Like, just devastated, right? And I think these guys were crying in the corner. And me, I was so happy, right? Smiling, laughing, having a great time. And one of the executives came in and said, Corey, you must be magnanimous. And I said, yeah, no fucking way. Okay? I'm not magnanimous. I'm a sore winner. And by the way, I won. I walked off the set. I quit CNN that night and said, this place is so disingenuous. I can't be part of it. So, there is an inherent bias in the media. There's no question about it. It is an unequivocal proven fact. The Media Research Center does this research all the time. But I think by and large, and I know people won't believe me, I've seen it from the inside, the people who work there are good people if you can get them away from the camera. Now, you have some absolute lunatics. Anna Navarro is batshit crazy. Okay, we know that. Okay, there are some of these people who are just untenable to talk to, right? No matter what, they claim to be Republicans, and then they just hate everything about Donald Trump. The fact that he had the greatest economy ever, the federal judiciary that he and Mitch McConnell have completely and fundamentally transformed for future generations, the deregulation environment, so many things, rebuilding our military, and all they do is want to complain about it. So I take no credence with those people, but by and large, I find the hosts of these shows are good people if you can get them away from the camera.
Nice.
That makes a lot of sense.
You could have a beer with Don Lemon, is what you're saying.
Hey, dude, I've had hundreds of beers with Don Lemon.
So we can all come together. This is a good moment.
Look, let me tell you something. I used to do Don Lemon's show at least 1 or 2 nights a week, and in New York. And let me tell you about Don Lemon, okay? Because I get to know him pretty well. Look, did he and I agree on anything? Probably not. Not one thing. And we would go at it on set because that's what's expected, right? I bring a point of view. He brings a different point of view. We'd walk off that show. There's a little bar right across the street from CNN. We'd go down there. We'd have a beer together, or 2 or 5 or whatever. And the whole team, the whole production team would come down. They were a very close family on the Don Lemon team, right? Working late night. That guy was so generous. I don't think even if I tried to, he would let me buy a beer. That's how generous Don is as a human being, as a person. Look, does he hate Donald Trump? I don't know. Does he say things that, he probably someday, maybe he will or wouldn't regret? I don't know. I can only tell you my experience with Don Lemon was one where we disagreed professionally on set. We walked away. We went down and we had a beer and we had a conversation. That's my same experience with multiple other people who work at these networks, because they're not going to change my opinion. I'm not going to change their opinion. But at the end of the day, and I learned this from David Axelrod and Paul Begala. When I left the Trump campaign, I sat down with these two guys at the Republican National Convention 4 years ago. And you know what they said? And we sat at this little table, and Paul was huge in the Clinton world, and David was obviously huge in the Obama world, and I was the campaign manager for the Trump world. And the three of us sat down and they said, you know what, Corey? We don't like anything, basically, that your boss stands for. We don't agree with anything. But we respect you for putting the uniform on and playing the game. There's a lot of people who want to sit on the sidelines on Monday morning quarterback you and tell you what you did or didn't do right, how you should have did it, but they never put the uniform on. They never had the guts to get into the arena themselves. And that told me a lot. And to this day, I consider Dave Axelrod a friend. David is a smart, strategic guy. We don't agree on politics, but I could go and have a beer with that guy any day of the week.
I think you just blew a lot of people's minds, Corey.
Well, hey, look,
so everybody across the world, if Corey Lewandowski and Don Lemon and David Axelrod can sit down together and get along, how about we just all try it?
Look,
and move on.
You can't fire me because I don't work for anybody. I mean, look, I'm the senior advisor of the Trump campaign, right? But look, the truth is, the media has a job to do, okay? And I don't mean to get on a rant on this, but they have a job to do. I don't always agree with the way they cover the president. He doesn't always agree with the way they cover the president. But part of our relationship, meaning my relationship with the media, their relationship with me, it's mutually beneficial and it's mutually adversarial. You know, they write shit about me. I'm like, that's just total bullshit. I didn't have 7 eyes coming out of my head and 2 horns, and they call me Lucifer at the campaign. That never actually happened. But, you know,
we'll confirm that.
They count it as gospel, right? So, but look, you know, you have to, if you're going to be in this business, if you take everything that they say about you personally, you can't survive. And the people that I care about at the end of the day that make a difference, that matter, are all in the house I'm sitting in right now. My kids, my wife, my mom, right? If those people have a different opinion than what I think is important, then I'm doing something wrong. But I don't really care what other people think.
It's good advice. I like it. Good words to live by.
Now, go ahead, Todd.
I was gonna say, did you want to ask any of the lightning round questions for Corey?
Yeah, Corey, how much time you got left? You tell
I need
me.
a buzzer. If you got a lightning round, I need a buzzer to buzz in. I am the fastest like Jeopardy buzzer player ever. Right?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a couple more.
Like
there's
when
a couple more.
Tucker Carlson, bang, fat dude. I am so fat. I crushed Bossy on the quiz. Bam! I know every answer, dude. You got to give it to me. Come on.
That's because you had 15 Monster Energy drinks a day, Corey. You would beat everybody
today, but I did ride like 25 miles, so I'm a little calmer than I normally would be.
Well, before we get to the lightning round, I did have just a couple more quick questions, and then we'll move on to the lightning round. Get you out of here. You've been more than generous with your time today. I have to ask you. You mentioned when we were talking about the normal campaign day, you would say, 9 o'clock in the morning, we talk about the events of the day. What was it like when one of those events was a tweet that went out at 6:30 in the morning? Because I mean, inevitably, I think Trump's even said this before. He can send out 100 good tweets and he can send out one bomb every now and then. And he's like, probably could have done that better. What is that like, and how often is he actually on his phone? I'm just curious.
To be very fair, the president does almost all of his own tweeting. That's a fact. There's only, that I know of in the world, there are 3 people that I know of that have access to his Twitter account that can actually post to it. And I would say of those 3 people, there may only be 2 right now, he being one of them, 99% of the tweets that go out are either typed directly by him into his phone or dictated by him to somebody who put it directly into the phone. So this is him unvarnished. And look, people would say to me, please get the president to stop tweeting. I say, I will never do that. I'm not a person. I came up with this idea of let Trump be Trump. It was the name of my first book. And what I meant by that was, as a political operative, which is all I am, or a hack, or whatever you want to call me, right? It's not my job to change a person. It's my job. I used to say this. It was like riding American Pharaoh for you Kentucky boys, okay? Well, what I think was maybe the greatest racehorse. You could say Secretariat, you could say others, but I think American Pharaoh was a hell of a horse. And I just wanted to hold on. I just wanted to put the blinders on, guide them into the corner just a little bit, and I want to let you run. Because the American people and voters have a right to know who you are. It's not my job to put words in your mouth, tell you how to say things. I'm not running for office. And so when Donald Trump put a tweet out, he'd say, hey, Cor, what do you think of this one? I'd say, sir, you feel better? Oh, I feel better. That one felt good. It's okay, then let's move on, okay? Now, were there a couple I'd say, I really wish you didn't do that one. You betcha. But I would say of the thousands and thousands and thousands of tweets that he put out, I might have taken exception with 1, 2, maybe, because it's not my job to tell him what to or not to say. So, look, does it cause some consternation about campaign people? And yeah, sure. I don't care about that stuff, to be honest with you. I say, let Trump be Trump.
Got it. Last question before the lightning round, Corey. Obviously, Kentucky went big for Trump in 2016. Did Donald Trump ever say anything about Kentucky? Has he ever visited Kentucky other than campaign stops? So what were his overall thoughts, aside from the fact that he won by a pretty sizable margin?
Well, look, we've got some great friends in Kentucky. I don't want to go through them all, but Congressman Andy Barr is just an amazing guy. And, the tragedy that his family has come through in the last few months is heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I know the family. I know Andy really well. He's a good man. And, my thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family. I've gotten to know Rand Paul really well. He may be one of the few senators that I go up and just hang out with, right? For no reason other than to go up and listen to him and talk to him and get his point of view on things. And he's a really, really smart guy. So the president has enormous respect for not just your federal elected officials. And look, I'll tell you, Matt Bevin was also a friend of mine. And I talked to Matt, he's a New Hampshire guy from Coos County, and he was back home in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago, and I connected with him. So, I respect Kentucky, and I'll tell you this, the president respects it. The president, he won't admit it, I don't think, but, that eastern part of Kentucky, which is Andy's district, which is some of the most well-groomed, best-known racehorse facilities in all of the world, is so prideful. The president doesn't drink, obviously, but he often talks about Kentucky bourbon and making sure that when it comes to our trade practices and our trade deals, Kentucky has a fair chance to compete on the global stage. And he thinks about that all the time. And we've had those conversations, not just because you're a great state and you voted for Donald Trump, but because it's the right thing to do for the American people. So he is very prideful of the success stories of each of our states and what they offer. And I was with him in Mount Rushmore when he gave the speech for the 3rd of July, 4th of July celebration. He talks about all the states individually. Last night when I was with him, he was talking about Iowa and the devastation that state has just gone through. And he landed there today to see some of that. So he talks about how beautiful the state is, particularly a guy who grew up in New York City. He's not used to seeing a lot of beautiful bluegrass. The Kentucky bluegrass, he would say, is the best. And I agree with him. It's what's in my yard right here.
Nice. Tyler, do you have any other questions before we get to the lightning round?
I guess you have obviously kids, and a big issue in Kentucky right now is whether or not schools should reopen to in-person learning or do virtual learning. Do you have just a quick take on what you think schools should do? How are your kids dealing with the learning from home or that? Just thoughts on schools dealing with everything.
It's really easy in my world. Okay, you close the borders and you open our schools. That's a very simplistic answer, but you close the borders to illegal immigration, and we have the same immigration system that every other industrial country has, which is if we need immigrants, we will ask you to come, and you'll do so legally, and that's the right way to go. When it comes to our schools, you have to open our schools, and let me tell you why. I live in a great little community in New Hampshire, and we're very fortunate. I've got 4 children, ages 9 to 13 years old, and my wife was a former teacher. So I had the luxury when we went to online learning that my wife could be here and understand how to help educate our kids, okay? Because our kids go to the public schools in this town. But some of the kids in some of these communities who are forced to go to online learning have never checked back into the school, okay? In some communities, 30% of the children have gone missing. And I don't mean physically missing, but they're no longer part of the school system. They're not getting a hot meal. The teachers who are also the first line of defense against child abuse and neglect aren't seeing these kids. The parents at home are in an untenable situation where maybe they don't have access to the internet, they can't afford a computer, or the schools don't provide that, and they're too busy trying to do other things or just don't have the capability to teach these kids. We are going to ruin a whole generation of children for fear of them catching a virus whose impact on people under the age of 30 is as severe as influenza. And I'm not diminishing the death of one person, because one person's death is one person too many. But we can't close our school systems and tell our children, you can't come and learn here anymore because you might catch the coronavirus. Because if that's what we're going to do, gentlemen, let me just throw this out to you. If we're going to go to online learning and the teachers are going to online teach every child, then what stops the poorest kid in the worst neighborhood from going to the best school system anymore, right? Why am I paying my taxes in my community where 80% of my revenue goes to the teachers if they're not going to teach my kids? Why did we just build a $100 million elementary school if we're not going to use it anymore? So I'm gravely concerned. They just came up with this hybrid model in my little town. If your last name is A through L, you go to school Monday, Wednesday, Friday 1 week, and Tuesday, Thursday the other week. I said, what the hell is that? Who the hell can remember this, right? I mean, you got to be kidding me. Either we want our kids in school full time because that's what they deserve. I think the kids are the ones who are getting shortchanged.
Yeah, we thought some of the options here were pretty crazy. Doing A through L last names, that seems a little out there. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. All right, Corey, this is big. You may want to chug you a Monster Energy drink.
Okay, hold on. Ready.
This won't be as severe as a Senate committee or anything like that, and no bathroom breaks allowed.
Okay.
Okay. So here we go. These are just going to be quick answers just to get to know you a little bit better. And I'm going to run through them real quick. Quick answers.
Okay.
Ready to roll?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Better coach right now, Coach Calipari or Coach Krzyzewski at Duke?
Oh, Coach K, man. I hate to say it, Coach K is the greatest ever, maybe.
That's all right. We can edit that out.
Hey, he's a Pollock like me. I got to give him a little credit. He's a Pollock like me.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll give you that one. All right. Who does Trump dislike more, Nancy Pelosi, Jeff Sessions, or the coronavirus?
Jeff Sessions, coronavirus, Nancy Pelosi, in that order.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Backstreet Boys are in sync.
Neither. No boy bands for me.
Okay. What is it then?
The greatest band from the 80s has to be like, maybe that was the 90s, right? I would say Survivor.
What do you listen to? Survivor. Whoa.
Wow.
Hey, Eye of the Tiger, baby. It's the Eye of the Tiger. Don't you watch Rocky?
I imagine you listening to Eye of the Tiger while you're chugging those energy drinks and plowing through your runs and your bicycle rides.
Look, I'll
We'll
tell
try
you
to get
what.
that meme
Just
later.
aside, I love sports movies. I love Rudy. I love Rocky. I love all those movies. I love anything that is an inspiring movie where the underdog comes back and wins.
Got it. If the Republican presidential nominees that were running in 2016 were in a battle royal, besides Trump, who wins?
Chris Christie.
Why is that?
Good answer.
He's tough. Chris is a fighter, and I think if Donald Trump would have not been in that race, Chris Christie would have had what I call the tough guy lane, and his straight talk, tough attitude would have propelled him to victory over some of the others.
Even in the wrestling ring, if they're in a battle royal, you think Chris Christie can throw them all over the top rope? That's what we're going for here.
He's got some moves, man. Look at that guy. Okay?
Okay.
Who's going to pick up Chris Christie and body slam him? Nobody. I mean, come on.
That's a good point. You talk about him having to throw other people. Somebody would have to throw Chris Christie over.
You're going to get a hold of that guy. You're not getting your arms around him to move him. He's like a mountain, man. Like, there's no way. There's no chance.
Good. That's good to know. Who is the next Republican president, besides not counting Trump? Who do you see as the next Republican president?
I think Mike Pence is the heir apparent to the administration and would do a phenomenal job.
Okay. Who wins in a fight, Mitch McConnell or Chuck Schumer?
Ooh, that's the battle of the octogenarians, right?
Yeah. You even think they make it to the ring?
If they, it's going to be short rounds, right? Short rounds, like 10-second rounds and then water breaks. I'm putting my money on Mitch because he's the longest serving majority leader ever, and so that means he's got to be tough.
Well, and the other thing, he did get the nickname Cocaine Mitch from somebody, so maybe there's something to that.
Look,
Maybe he ends up running to the ring for all that.
I don't know where that comes from, but I can tell you it takes a long time. It's hard to be the longest serving majority leader ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Favorite movie?
Probably Goodfellas.
Goodfellas. And last one, what is the meaning of life?
Happiness, and I think happiness includes being rich. And what I mean by rich is you're not reliant on somebody else to earn a living. I think that's really important. And having a family that actually supports everything you do without hesitation, which sounds easy, but is incredibly difficult because I get to do amazing things all the time, fly around on planes, the Air Force One, Marine One with the president, and my kids and family are back home missing it all. And I know when I come back in the door, I think they still like me. And so that's what it is for me.
Awesome. Well, you did it, Corey. That was impressive. Quick answers. I think the people got to know you a little bit better on that one. And hopefully, through the course of this interview, they got to know you a little bit more than what they see in your normal, 5 or 7 minute segments on CNN or Fox News, which was really the whole gist of this. We're an apolitical show. We just want to hear all the stories from all sides. We really don't care what anyone says. We just want to hear what they're saying. So we really, really appreciate you being on. We've gone for almost an hour.
Well, look, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. I hope your viewers, maybe they think about me a little differently, right? Maybe they go buy my new book, Trump, America First. Maybe they don't, but maybe they say, hey, this guy isn't as bad as the left says, or they say, it's everything we've always thought. The guy's a complete lunatic and we hate him even more. So I appreciate the forum, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And next time you go on one of those bus tours in Florida, we were expecting an invite. We want to come. That sounds like fun.
Well, hey, I'm doing the bus tour. Now, look, I'm not going back to Florida, but I'm in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I'm in Pennsylvania on Friday of this week. I'm in North Carolina on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. I'm in Georgia Tuesday and Wednesday. So, look, hey, you guys, when I roll through Eastern Kentucky, right, Southern Ohio, right, come on by. If I'm in Cincinnati, come on up.
Yeah, we'll take you up on that.
Awesome. Corey, if you don't mind, stick around for just a second or two after we finish up here. We really appreciate you being on, and we'll stay in touch, okay?
Thank you.